One man was richer than the United States government, and one day, to save the country from collapse, he locked the doors and held everyone hostage. October 1907. You wake up, walk to your bank, and the doors are closed. Not because it's a holiday, because there's no money left. The bank next door, closed. The one across the street, closed. 16 major banks shut down in a single week, and panic spreads like wildfire through New York City. People are losing everything they own, not because they made bad decisions, but because the entire financial system is imploding. This isn't a story from some distant country or ancient history. This happened in America, barely a century ago, and what happened next changed everything you think you know about money and power. Because when the government couldn't fix it, when the president himself was powerless, one man stepped in and did what no single person should ever be able to do. He saved the country. And in doing so, he terrified everyone. Let me tell you what really went down, because this story isn't just about the past. It's about right now. It's about who controls your money, who makes the rules, and what happens when those rules break. And trust me, they're breaking again. So here's what you need to understand first. In 1907, America didn't have a central bank, no Federal Reserve, no safety net. If banks failed, they failed. If you lost your savings, you lost them. Period. The entire economy ran on trust, and that trust was held together by a handful of incredibly wealthy men, the biggest of whom was J.P. Morgan. This guy wasn't just rich, he was by entire governments rich. His net worth in today's money, over $1 trillion. He owned railroads, steel companies, banks, and he basically controlled the flow of money in America. When Morgan spoke, markets moved. When he invested, fortunes were made, and when he got angry, well, you didn't want to be on the receiving end. But in October 1907, even Morgan couldn't stop what was coming. It started with a scheme. Two speculators, Augustus Heinze and Charles Morse, tried to corner the copper market. Their plan? Buy up all the copper stock, drive the price through the roof, and make millions. Simple, right? Except it wasn't. The scheme failed spectacularly. Their brokerage firm collapsed. And because everything in finance is connected, their collapse triggered a chain reaction. Banks that had loaned them money suddenly realized those loans would never be repaid. Those banks started failing. People who had deposits in those banks panicked and rushed to withdraw their money. Other banks, seeing the panic, also got hit with withdrawal demands. And just like that, the entire banking system started to crumble. This is what we call a bank run, and it's every banker's worst nightmare. Now here's the thing about banks. They don't actually keep all your money in a vault. They lend most of it out. So when everyone shows up at once demanding their deposits, the bank simply doesn't have it. Even healthy banks can fail during a panic, not because they're broke, but because they can't turn their assets into cash fast enough. And in 1907, healthy banks were failing left and right. The stock market crashed. Companies couldn't get loans. Workers weren't getting paid. The entire economy was grinding to a halt. And the government? Completely helpless. President Theodore Roosevelt, one of the most powerful presidents in American history, could do absolutely nothing. There was no mechanism for the government to inject money into the system, no emergency powers, no playbook. The United States government was watching its economy collapse in real time and couldn't do a damn thing about it. Enter J.P. Morgan. At 70 years old, this man looked at the crisis and decided he would fix it himself. Not because he was a hero, not because he cared about the little guy, but because if the economy collapsed, his empire collapsed with it. Morgan called a meeting at his private library in Manhattan. He invited the most powerful bankers in New York, the guys who controlled the money supply, and he told them what was going to happen. They were going to pool their resources and bail out the failing banks. They were going to restore confidence in the system. And they weren't leaving until they agreed. Some of them resisted. Why should they risk their own money to save competitors? Why should they bail out banks that made bad decisions? Morgan didn't argue with them. He simply locked the doors. Literally. He took the key, put it in his pocket, and told them nobody was leaving until they came up with the money. Can you imagine that? The richest, most powerful men in America held hostage in a library by one man who decided he alone would determine the fate of the nation. They stayed there all night. Morgan paced the room, smoking cigars, playing solitaire while the bankers argued and negotiated. Outside, the country was burning. Inside, these men held the power to put out the fire, and Morgan made sure they used it. By dawn, they had agreed. They pooled $25 million, an astronomical sum at the time, and injected it into the failing banks. Morgan personally guaranteed the stock market, promising that he would buy any stock that fell below a certain price. His word alone was enough to stabilize the markets. Within days, the panic subsided. Banks reopened. The economy stabilized. J.P. Morgan, acting as a one-man central bank, had saved the United States from total financial collapse. But here's where it gets interesting. Everyone was relieved, yes, but they were also terrified. Because what just happened proved something incredibly dangerous. One man had more power than the government. One man could decide whether the economy lived or died. And if that man had been malicious, if he had chosen to let everything burn, or worse, if he had profited from the chaos, there would have been nothing anyone could do to stop him. This wasn't democracy. This wasn't government by the people. This was financial feudalism, and everyone knew it. The panic of 1907 exposed a fundamental flaw in the American system. Without a central authority to manage the money supply, the entire economy was vulnerable to the whims of individuals. And while Morgan saved the day this time, what about next time? What if the next Morgan wasn't so benevolent? So Congress acted. 6 years later, in 1913, they created the Federal Reserve, a central bank controlled by the government, not by private individuals, with the power to regulate the money supply, act as a lender of last resort, and prevent future panics. The Fed was born directly from the fear of what happened in 1907, the fear that one man should never again have that much power. But here's the irony. The Fed was supposed to prevent concentration of financial power. It was supposed to protect the economy from the whims of wealthy elites. And yet, if you look at today, the biggest banks are larger than ever. The wealth gap is wider than it's been in a century. And when the financial system collapsed in 2008, who bailed it out? The government, using taxpayer money to save the same institutions that caused the crisis. Sound familiar? The lesson of 1907 wasn't just that we needed a central bank. It was that financial systems are fragile, that panics are contagious, and that power, whether held by one man or one institution, is dangerous when unchecked. Morgan's intervention worked because he had credibility, resources, and the will to act. But it also worked because people believed it would work. Confidence is everything in finance. Money only has value because we agree it has value. Banks only function because we trust them. And when that trust breaks, everything falls apart. Fast. Today we have the Federal Reserve, we have deposit insurance, we have regulations designed to prevent another 1907. But we also have algorithms trading billions of dollars in milliseconds, cryptocurrencies operating outside government control, and global financial networks so complex that nobody fully understands them. The tools have changed, but the fundamental truth remains. Our financial system runs on trust, and when that trust evaporates, all the regulations in the world might not be enough. J.P. Morgan saved America once by locking men in a room and forcing them to act. Who saves us next time? And more importantly, should we be building a system that needs saving in the first place? History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. The panic of 1907 taught us that no individual should have the power to control an entire economy. Yet here we are, over a century later, watching central banks print trillions, watching billionaires move markets with a single tweet, watching systems that are supposed to protect us instead protect the powerful. Morgan's library is still standing in New York. You can visit it if you want. But the real question isn't what happened in that room in 1907. It's what's happening in the rooms we can't see today, the ones where decisions are made that affect your savings, your job, your future, and whether this time, when the doors lock, anyone will be inside fighting for you. Learning begins with asking curious questions. If there's something on your mind or a question you'd like to explore, let's meet in the comments and find the answer together. And if you're curious about the harmony between history and money, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more.